What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review, and today I am talking about the latest offering from Spanish blackened death metal legends Teitanblood with From the Visceral Abyss. This also came out on March 28th, this time on Norma Evangelium Diaboli, and if I recall, I think this is the band's fifth studio full-length overall, and this is actually my first time checking this band out. I have heard a lot of buzz about this band in terms of blackened death metal, or some people even call them war metal, even though it's not a real genre. But when it comes to those quote-unquote war metal bands, I'm not the biggest fan of that style. But when giving this a listen, I was like, okay, I mean, I see the bands they get compared to on the Metal Archives, you know, like Blasphemy, Archgoad, Revenge, Conqueror, those kind of bands that are considered war metal. But I also saw they were compared to the band Black Curse, which I remember checking out their album late last year, and I thought it was pretty damn good, so I thought, okay, maybe this will be more along those lines. And thankfully, I was right. This definitely fits more in that, like, Black Curse kind of sound in terms of blackened death metal, where it's raw and nasty sounding, but still very much in between both genres. Kicking things off with Enter the Hypogeum. Now, I'll touch on it after I get through all the songs, but after a bit, you get into these, like, nasty, thrashy riffs that remind me of, like, very early Morbid Angel. Like, a lot of these thrashy bits that are going on pretty much across the board on this album makes me think of, like, you know, very early Morbid Angel, like the Abominations of Desolation demo, and even Altars of Madness, and to a lesser extent Blessed Are the Sick when it gets fast. It's very much in that vein, but just done in a much more raw, crazier fashion. And then it kind of develops into more blasting, and then there's some galloping rhythms. And then, of course, when it comes down to lead work, it's like, most of these songs, when it comes down to lead work, it's like it starts off with, like, those big, like, Slayer and Morbid Angel-esque dive bombs, and then you get solos afterwards where they're more shred. On this song, it starts off with shred, and then you get dive bombs after you get a lot of death metal tremolo riffs. Like, for the most part, the tremolo riffs all over this album, I'd say, are more death metal than black metal. It's just done with, like, a almost black metal production. But, of course, that leads us to another big component on this album, and that is the dissonance. Like, there's a lot of dissonance on this album, but they're not, like, long sections of dissonance. They're just there to kind of add an element of discomfort and more of, like, a grotesque atmosphere. And most of the time the dissonance is more black metal dissonance than death metal dissonance, which is where I think the real hybrid of the two genres is. It's like mostly death metal, borderline on grindcore a little bit, with, like, blackened dissonance and production values. And even in the vocals, kind of fit in between black metal and death metal, but they're very unwieldy. I will fully admit the vocals, I actually love the vocals on here. It's just wild stuff. Sepulchral Carrion God starts off with this, like, cavernous build, almost like incantation, before you get into, like, dissonant melodies again, and even a melodic solo shows up, and even some of the riffs that come in are a bit more melodic, and it's also kind of doomy and groovy at first, before it just hits you with, like, grindcore blast beats and tremolo riffs. It does transition more into, like, the thrashy Morbid Angel stuff, and even a really cool drum groove comes in. Like, drum grooves come in periodically on this album to kind of add a little bit more diversity to the rhythm section, as opposed to just blast beats and thrash beats. The title track, big time tremolos and blasts that come along with those big squealy dive bombs. And this is one of the, I mean, the whole album is aggressive, but the vibe of this song just amps up the aggression, in my opinion. And of course, more dissonant melodies. And then there's a section where the blasts and tremolos gets so insane, it kind of reminds me of a band like Portal a little bit, where it's just uncomfortable, but still somehow intriguing to hear. Even like some really cool like tom drum accents towards the end. Strangling Visions, thrashy rhythms with like those tremolo riffs galore. And this is really the only time on the album where some of the tremolos and blasts do kind of go more for a black metal feel as opposed to a death metal feel. But it gallops along again pretty nicely. And then And Darkness Was All, you know, starts off with like dive bombs while the riffs are forming. It's really cool drums, once again, like awesome drum patterns. And of course, you know, it just blunt force trauma with these riffs and drums going on. Dare I say, whenever it gets to like the more faster sections, it's almost punky a little bit. And hell, the dissonant melodies that come in, they are playing on top of a groove, which leads us to the longest track of the album at over 14 minutes, Tomb Corpse Haruspex. Dissonant melody to start off and a nasty riff, and it's almost like a more raw immolation kind of vibe. Tremolo riffs on top of like a doom rhythm before it just gets back to like thrashy Morbid Angel vibes and blasts and gallops. There's even a triplet chug that shows up, but it's very, very brief. But still, drum grooves come up once again. And yeah, this song was just kind of like, again, one of those all-encompassing songs where it just goes for everything that this album was doing prior. You know, tremolos, blasts, gallops, thrash, discomfort, dissonant melodies, the whole 9 yards. Like I said, the production, it's really raw, but it's not in a bad way. I actually kind of like the production on here because it just screams honesty. However, there were quite a few issues I had with this album. The first one and the biggest issue I had was almost every single song, apart from Strangling Visions, all start off with these like weird, strange, ambient nonsense. It was too much. Like literally every song has like 30 seconds to 45 seconds of like weird noises and ambient builds. I just would have cut all that out, and I think it would have made these songs stronger. Of course, the interlude, 700 Dogs from Hell, I just thought it was absolutely pointless. And then, Tomb Corpse Haruspex, while a great closer, the final few minutes is just nothing but noise. And I'm just kind of like, that's really how you want to end this? But aside from those complaints, like, every song, for the most part, was just chaotic and wild, but really fun to listen to. So overall, despite my complaints, I still thought this was some great stuff. I'm going to go 4 out of 5 on this one. I actually enjoyed this quite a bit, so if you're a fan of bands like Black Curse, Impetuous Ritual, Necrovore, check it out. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.